Wow. So guess what? My stepmother has dementia. She does. It's happening. She's having a tough time with it. We are having a tough time with it. Not because of any other reason than the fact that we want her to know who we are. And the reality is, I don't think she really even cares if she remembers who I am or who I'm not, right? I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I just know that all parties involved have a really tough time with it. So, why would I bring that up on a real estate podcast? Well, she's also half owner of my parents' house, my father's house. So, it's super important to have a trust. So important. So let's get into what a trust is here in the state of California, right? So a trust is a legal arrangement where one party, known as the trustor or the settlor, transfer assets to another party, the trustee, to manage and hold for the benefit of a third party, the beneficiary. Trusts are used for various purposes, including estate planning. You transfer wealth to heirs and beneficiaries efficiently, often with tax advantages, without the need for probate, which is a legal process of distributing a deceased person's assets. Can also be used for asset protection, which is to safeguard assets from creditors, lawsuits, or other claims. Trusts also provide privacy. Unlike wills, they're not generally part of the public record. And management of assets for individuals who may not be able or willing to manage their assets, like my mother, stepmother, who has dementia. A trust can ensure professional management and continuity over time. Special needs planning to provide for the care and financial support of a person with special needs without affecting their eligibility for government-assisted programs. California has very specific laws and regulations governing the creation, administration, and enforcement of trusts, which are a part of the California Probate Code. And this is why you don't want to end up in probate. Probate is so expensive here in the state of California. Whereas if you have a trust, you can go ahead and do what you need to do as the family dynamic changes, right? Someone passes away, someone gets dementia, any of those items happen, right? We start right here very simply in the headlines today in the Los Angeles Times. Jay Leno's wife, Mavis Leno, sometimes does not know him due to dementia, his lawyer says. So Jay Leno is currently in the process of becoming he's in the process of creating conservatorship over his wife's estate. It's a decision that he had to make after he realized his wife could no longer do it. It's one of the reasons why you want a trust in place. So I just recently sat down with my dad and my stepmother to review our family trust, to see the details of that. And it was so nice to see that everything was in place, right? That everything made sense. Now, I have the added benefit of being a real estate agent, a realtor. So I see a lot of trusts I see a lot of people who are working through these details. I deal with it in transaction after transaction after transaction. And so you've got to make sure your trust includes everything. So when mom and dad go off and get a trust, you want to sit down and read it to make sure you got it all, that everything's included. I just recently sold a property here locally, and dad had a trust. And he also had a mobile home, a manufactured home, which here in California is considered personal property. Well, they thought that the home, the mobile home, was in the trust and had gotten transferred the trust, and their daughter was in charge of the trust. And we found out as we reviewed the trust, it wasn't there. The mobile home had not been put in the trust. So, dad, great news was dad had full ability, capability to move the sale forward. He just didn't want to have to deal with it anymore. He thought he tackled it all, and he was giving it to his daughter to handle the details. And he still had to handle the mobile home. That transaction went fantastic. No challenges with regards to it. We sold it. Super happy people. But my point in that conversation is that piece is make sure you review your trust and you haven't missed anything. Make sure you've went through the details to make sure all is included. And there's so much to be included in a trust. As I was reviewing my father's, I saw that his also communicated how the assets would be given up, right? Who would get what, how much it was. The details were all there. How quickly we need to do it or not. We had one transaction I was doing. This was probably 6 years ago. And it was 5 siblings that had inherited mom's home. 5 siblings. Could you imagine bringing 5 siblings together? And not only had they inherited mom's home, but they also inherited 3 other investment properties. I'm going to tell you in all transparency, I think this mom did it the best. Because what I saw was mom said, upon my passing, I need all my property liquidated within 90 days. Can you imagine that? This family with 5 siblings, and they were all over the place. I met 4 of them in a conference room in Yorba Linda at my real estate office, and another one joined us via Zoom from Oregon. Okay, well, I'm meeting 5 siblings, and they've got to sell 3 different properties just with me, and still they had a primary residence that they were using a different agent for. And so that was the reality of it, right? The siblings all inherited the property, and they had to sell it within 90 days. It made it very simple because you look at this, I'm looking at another trending article in the internet, and I personally have dealt with this as well. Had 2 brothers who inherited a home from their mom. These 2 brothers, well, they're like oil and water, right? That's just how they are. And so for 3 to 4 years, they had turned mom and dad's house into a rental property. And yes, they hired a property manager so that they wouldn't have to have the day-to-day conversations and deal with the ins and outs of the property. And yet you still really do. Even though you hire a property manager, you're still involved because you need to be a responsible property owner and stay involved in the conversation, right? To what degree that is truly up to you as the homeowner. But when you have a brother and a brother who are like oil and water. Well, I mean, could you just imagine what that's like? You've got a property that has a family in it, that has people in it that are, well, it's called wear and tear. This needs to be fixed, that needs to be fixed. Things just happen. You can't consider yourself a responsible property owner if you're not making sure you're taking care of that property. And real estate needs constant care. So if you were thinking you'd get into real estate and not have to do anything, well, that's not true. Requires constant care and check. So here we have two brothers who are like, one's like, I wanted to sell it as soon as I got it. And the other one was like, no, 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 I love it. It's mom's house. I want to keep it and hold on to it. It's so special. And so we'll just rent it out. So, of course, the nice brother, and it's not that he was the nice brother, but he was a nice brother and said, all right, that's fine. We'll rent it out. So they did. They rented it out for about 3 to 4 years. So remember, you inherit a property. Here's the beautiful thing. When you inherit real estate here in the state of California, well, there's nothing to disclose because you didn't occupy the property. You didn't have anything to do with the property. So it's easy enough to sell it and not really have any liability risk in the transfer because you didn't know anything about the property unless you become the property owner and become a property owner where you put tenants in, or you occupy the residence yourself. Because now you put yourself in liability and you have some risk because you're aware of different types of repairs and work that needed to be done to the property during your time of ownership. So you need to make sure you are full disclosure on that, and you would do that anyways. So, it's all good. You got to disclose in the state of California. Anything that's happened to the property within the last 3 years of your ownership, disclose. If you think, should I say it? Yes, you should. Just say it. Okay. So you get a mom and dad who, or a mom and mom, or a dad and dad, whatever it be, right? Or a sister and brother, or a brother and brother, or a sister and sister. They pass away. Here is the house to the siblings. And the siblings now have to move forward with, what do we do? Well, at some point, oil brother or water brother says, I want my portion. I want out. Buy me out. So how do you determine that? You've been maintaining this property for some time. You've been doing what you need to do. With regards to repairs and maintenance. And maybe you were the brother or the sister or the sibling who was paying for all of that stuff. Should you get paid back? Of course you should. Then there's the potential mortgage payment that might still be on the property, and the property taxes, and the insurance, and all the maintenance that comes along with the property, and anything else that might show up as a lien against the property. Well, that all has to be taken into consideration. So when you do the math, it's not always going to be black and white. Because then you collected rent for a short period of time, however long you had the property. You did what you needed to do. So, does it make sense to do it? Every family is different. Every family figures it out. And some families do it better than others. Some families, well, they're just explosive. And then there's families that come together on it. So, you're the one to know whether or not it makes sense for your family. I know for me personally, I'm out. I'm going to liquidate property right away. And I'm going to go ahead and pay everyone off. And the only people I do business with are the people that I'm legally married to. Or if I decide to create a partnership, and in general, I'm not a big fan of partnerships. It just becomes more complicated because you have more energy, more feelings, more dynamics. There's wins and there's cons to it, pros and cons, wins and losses to it. One way is not better than the other. It's just what you personally lead. But I can tell you this, when you inherit property with your siblings, I think, and I loved what that family member did when she said, sell mine within 90 days. Make it happen. Just made great sense. And they did. All 5 of those siblings came to terms on a sales price for 3 properties. They all asked me to sell it on market to the highest investor who was willing to take it with the tenants in place and move things along, because they were in a position to hit the timeline that their parents set in the trust. All trusts are not created equal. All trusts should be reviewed. All trusts should be updated. They're like living, breathing documents. As a living, breathing person, as you continue to grow in your financial world and your life, you may add assets, you may subtract assets. And so you want to make sure that you get those involved and included and recorded in the trust. It is so important that you continue to stay on top of your trust. Stay on top of all the assets that you accumulate over time. And just put the details in there. What makes great sense? My father's trust and my stepmother's trust, I loved that it had a medical directive in there. So I knew exactly what to do when my mother, my stepmother, and my father came into a medical situation. I knew where I stood in it. I knew their desires because I read it and had the conversation with my dad right then and there. Dad, what do you want to do? How did you want this to happen? Did you want to be buried or cremated? Those are not fun conversations you want to have. They're not easy conversations either. Most people go, I'm going to stay away from that conversation. I'm going to stray away from it. I just don't want to talk about that stuff. I, to be completely transparent, didn't want to. I'd had my father's trust for many years, never read it. And my stepmother got dementia. And I said, well, now it's time. I pick this up. I'm going to encourage you to do it sooner than that. Do it sooner than that. It matters. Because if the trust hadn't been in order, it was too late. I can't correct anything. Now I've got to go into probate. Now I have so many uncertainties because I'm not quite sure what I'm working through. I'm not quite sure what the details look like because my stepmom, well, she isn't her best self anymore. And I don't know if she understands or tells me exactly what she wants. So do it in advance. Look through it as soon as possible. Keep it updated. Get yourself a trust. They vary in pricing. find yourself a great trust attorney that's going to help you understand the details of what can be put in a trust and what can't be put in a trust, and then move through that. It matters, and it simplifies life for your kids, especially if you have multiple kids. Just makes life easy. They got enough going on with just thinking about the passing of their parent or having to bury a parent to then think about what the heck else? My mom has this, this, and this, and this, and this. What do I do with all of this stuff? You want to make sure you get all of those things cleaned up nicely in a well thought out, well written, professionally done, with a licensed attorney of your choice here in the state of California. That's your number one priority, because you don't want to be in a position where, look at Jay Leno. His wife doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know her birthday. And she's got plenty of assets. They both do. And they've had plenty of their own medical challenges over time, and they're still going and growing strong. You want to do the same thing too. So just stay in front of that stuff. Partner with a great trust estate planning attorney. We know plenty that we could recommend to you. And go ahead and get that stuff in order, because it is your number one priority. I know I will, and I think you should too.